Thank you all for joining us for the Non-Academic Interviewing Strategies Workshop. Joining us today is Marianne Wiseman, Senior Director of Talent Acquisition and Development for the Division of Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement, Tiffany Whitehead, Assistant Vice President for Talent Acquisition at Credit One Bank, and Tiffany Fritchman, Goals Coach at US Bank. They are going to be chatting with us today about the steps necessary to have a successful interview and provide all of us with some tips about best communicating why we're the right person for a job we're interviewing for. So I'm going to go ahead and start us off with handing it over to our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions. So Tiffany W., will you get us started?
Oh, hello. My name is Tiffany Whitehead, and I am the Assistant Vice President of Talent Acquisition for Credit One Bank. And I think this is my fourth iteration of joining these workshops. I am passionate about participating in them. I love the questions and the energy and the engagement. So thank you guys again for having me. And I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you. I'll hand it over to Tiffany F.
Well, hello and good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be here. Tiffany Fritchman. I am a goals coach, and I think I've had many of my colleagues on multiple calls, although this is my first one, so I am very excited to be here. I've been working for US Bank I'm coming up on my 15th year, which is a little bit wild to think about how much time's gone by. But in previous roles, I've done a lot of interviewing and been like the final interviewer. So I'm excited to be here and talk with you all and give you any insight that I have to share. But I believe I'm always a learner, so I think I'll be learning from my fellow panelists as well. So great to be here.
Thank you. And Marianne.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marianne Wiseman. I work at UNLV at the Division of Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement. I'm the Senior Director of Talent Acquisition and Professional Development, and that is a mouthful that I work very hard to practice saying every day. But for the most part, I get to handle the human resources for the Division of Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement. And it's really exciting for me because I don't get to work with students very often. So I'm really appreciative to be here and happy to help out in any way that I can.
Thank you all so much. I have a feeling this is going to be a really exciting conversation, and I just want to open it up to all our participants. Please don't be shy and ask any questions that you might have about this topic. Our panel is excited to answer any questions that you might have. So like I had mentioned earlier, you can either type them in the chat, you can unmute yourself, you can type them directly to me, and I'll go ahead and ask on your behalf. So just to jump right in, I'm gonna start off with our first question here. How can I begin to prepare myself before an interview once I get that call that says, you've passed through this phase and now we want to invite you over to come chat with us so we can learn more about you? How can we begin to prepare ourselves? And I'll just open it up to whoever wants to take that first.
I'll go for it. Awesome. Well, I think, first off, you should be congratulating yourself that you got that call because that's a big win. And, as we're out and applying for things, we get a lot of rejections, right? We get a lot of rejection emails. We don't hear from people at all. So the fact that you have gotten this first interview it should be some building your own confidence as you're walking in, because the recruiters go through a lot of applications to get to yours. So I think just know that about yourself. What to prepare for, I think, be yourself. I think that's the most important thing. The business who is thinking about hiring you is thinking about bringing you on to their team, and your personality and who you are is going to fit onto that team, or it's not. So I think just, and that's just something to know as you're, going into the interview, is really bring your true self to that space. Know a little bit about the company as you're walking in. I think that's always a good thing. Prepare a couple of questions that you'll ask for after their portion is done asking you questions. And, you know, I think the thing that always has probably started off every interview I've ever done is a first impression. So I would say do your very best to show up early. um, Come in with a smile and greet your interview in a way that you would greet somebody that you're first meeting in the first for the first time. So those would be my suggestions.
Thank you. I think Marianne, did you want to go too?
Sure. I think to caveat off what Tiffany is saying, it's really important to know your audience and to know the company that you're applying for. It is very exciting that you have this foot in the door, and it just to do that a little bit of research, go on their website, see if there is the department that you're applying for, if they have their own individual website. Look and see if they have core values that they're advertising. Look and see the culture of that group and see how that aligns with your values. And go into that interview knowing that you know your environment, you know what that company stands for, and you can talk and be prepared to answer questions, aligning your answers with their core values and with their goals and aspirations as a company. So I think that those are things that really will set you apart, doing that homework in advance.
I would just add a couple of quick things. One of the things that I find is that people interviewing is nerve-wracking, right? It's a nervous thing, and your brain can get to spinning. Don't be afraid to slow down and think about your answers. It is perfectly acceptable to say, "Give me one moment. Let me." I don't want to give you a hasty answer. I want to make sure that I'm putting enough thought into this. And I think that you will find that your interviewer, your hiring manager will be very grateful that you behave in that way, right? Because it's so easy to want to have an answer for everything. And sometimes you just don't. So don't be afraid to say that. I think the other thing too is when you get to the point where where you're going to interview for the job, ensure that you've studied that job description so that you have a solid understanding of what it is that they're likely going to be looking for that's in print. But also, for the love of God, please be able to speak to items on your resume. So many times people like SEO their resume and they have all these fantastic keywords and buzzwords, and then they come into an interview with us and they can't speak to those things. So those are really, really important things. I think if you put it on your resume, make sure that you're ready to speak to it.
Thank you all. So, are there different aspects to an interview we should expect when we're going in for one?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of components, right? You can have a behavioral interview. Um, it's it's possible that depending on the type of role that you're going to engage in, you may be asked to do some type of testing. Um, I think those are some of the things that you could look to have happen during an interview process for sure.
Great. There's also some things that some organizations do that really set them apart, and actually things that they do, what they're looking for, how we're going to react as an applicant or as a candidate. I know, for example, Amazon for a while there, I'm not sure if they're still doing it, would set a phone interview first. And in that phone interview with a recruiter, just to get you through the first couple of lines, they will set it at 3:30, and just taking that for example, and they might be 15-20 minutes late, and they want to see how you're going to react to it. Are you going to be easygoing about it? Are you going to be upset? And how's that reaction when your schedule is a little bit different? So there are things that to look out for that. Look out for those things, and that also does go along with the core values. I see a hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can finish your thought and then I can share.
Oh, okay, sounds good. So there's those aspects, and then there can be panel interviews after you get through that one screening call. Then you can have a forward interview with somebody with the hiring manager, actually. So there's all different formats that can take place, and hopefully the recruiter or the person that's doing the hiring is explaining that to you when you're starting. So, Ashana, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna jump in, and I actually work in physician recruitment, and another like a different aspect to an interview is like a panel interview. So that's something you might expect going into the interview process, whether that's after the phone interview or after the interview with, who's gonna be your boss. But that's just something that I wanted to share.
I'll just make a couple comments here on that one too. I think many interviews that I have began with folks is I always like to ask them just a little bit about themselves before we get started in the actual interview. And I do that for trying to help them loosen up some of those nerves, because all of us, I mean, I've sometimes even just gone into I'm the person asking the questions and I'm nervous just going into it, because you just feel that nervous energy because you want to make a good impression, and then on the other side, I want the candidate to feel comfortable so that I can see their best self come forward. So I would say that typically having your cover letter or that resume is going to allow me to ask you a couple of questions just about your history so far so I can hear it in your own words as opposed to reading it on a resume. It comes out so differently when I get to hear your voice behind your history and your passion and all the things that have come ahead of time. So, or before you're here with me. So I would just say that that's a part of the interview. And then as the other Tiffany mentioned, the behavioral part. And then there's always going to be a close of the actual interview. You can tell you're wrapping up. I said this already, but I would say that the folks who stand out to me the most in any interview are the ones who come prepared with questions. And sometimes that question can just be about my own history as the person doing the interview with them. And it really has changed the game because I can tell that they're giving me a chance to talk about the company that I work for. So I would say um, definitely keep that in your hat of tricks to pull out if you're going in for an interview because most folks who are asking the questions would also love to be asked a question by you.
Thank you. So what should we do if we just don't know the answer to a question or we're just stumped and we just can't answer it? What's the right way to handle that?
Just say that. Full stop. Just say it.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's important, and it's also shows that you're able to be humble and you're able to ask follow-up questions and ask for assistance and be coachable. And that's really a great opportunity to just say, I just don't know. So I can't agree with Tiffany more.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else to add. I think they both answered that beautifully. Yes.
So just say you don't know it. All right. So you mean don't make up an answer or try to talk your way out of it. Okay.
Asks a follow-up question, say, I haven't experienced that in my role or in my education or but perhaps you could tell me a little bit more about that. And that could help too. But
Because
don't let that.
oftentimes,
What was
I'm
that?
sorry, Marianne, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, don't let that stop you and think
Yeah.
that just because you didn't know one thing out of the 300 questions that's going to be asked, that's going to deter you from getting that position. So, still keep your head together and realize that you'll have a great answer on something else.
Yeah. I think a lot of times too, that gives the interviewer an opportunity to ask the question differently. And but I think if you start looking to make up answers, that's where it gets really interesting. I cannot tell you guys how many interviews I have been on where I've asked somebody something that I think that they might know, or I asked the question differently, and they launch into a tirade of way off topic, and then it just goes, and they kind of keep going. And so I think that's it's exactly what Marianne said, right? Just be willing to ask a follow-up question. You know, maybe can you clarify for me or something like that. But yeah, launching off is typically not a good point.
Thank you. So our next question here is, what are some tips for successfully articulating our strengths or our skills and work experience?
I think being able to relate it to the business problem that the organization you're interviewing with is trying to solve. I think that is one of the things that always helps us kind of identify who's likely going to work out in the role, right, and who's not.
Can you ask that question one more time? I want to make sure that I understood what you said.
Yeah, just what are some tips that we can implement to successfully articulate our skills or our strengths?
Yeah, I would agree with what the other Tiffany had mentioned. I think so often some of the skills that we have learned along the way in school, or even in some of like maybe the part-time jobs that we have worked along the way, they can be transferable to the company that you're applying to in that moment. I think coming in ahead of time, thinking about some of the questions they might ask you though, and how you can transfer those skills. You might have to be the strategic person thinking about why you think those skills transfer. Sometimes I might not always see it, and I think having you spell it out for me or provide me some context on why you believe it does is helpful for me to paint the picture in my mind.
I have
I
another comment that you guys could tell me if this is like a good idea or something that I should continue to do. But in the past, what I've done is I would like print out the job description, study it, and then I would relate an experience or a project that I've done to those points in the job description. So whenever that comes up, I'm able to tie that together, show my skills, and tie it all together with the job that I'm going to be doing in the future. And I
That's
think
exactly what I meant.
yes, yeah,
Perfect.
okay. Okay. So I found that very successful that maybe other students, could try.
I think it's great too that you're talking about tying it to experiences. So it's one thing to have a candidate in front of me that knows and has heard about it, but when you can relate that to something that you've done, um, and something that you continue to do, it really just paints a better picture and makes you a stronger candidate. So I think that that's great advice there. And it doesn't necessarily, when it's your first job out of school, it doesn't necessarily have to be career related. You could use clubs and organizations um, were you on an executive board of an extracurricular activity during college? Were you on student government? And those are leadership skills and things that you've done there. So really trying to find those experiences that you have that relate to that job description is really, really important and a great move.
Thank you for that. I think sometimes when we're students, we forget that a lot of the things we do learn in classroom or with our time on campus is relatable. We learn communication skills and teamwork skills and how to follow through, and we can always kind of relate that and transfer it to the role that we're looking for. But we sometimes forget that, or we think we don't have an experience, but we do with everything that we've done on campus. So our next question here is, will the interviewers have my CV or resume in front of them, and should I try to create a narrative examples that relate back to my resume?
It depends on I wouldn't guarantee that they're going to have it in front of them. I always advise to bring copies, and so you can ask at that point. A lot of times, it's important to understand that as much as we recruiters want the hiring managers and the hiring team and the folks that are making those decisions to be prepared, they're not always prepared, and sometimes they're nervous, just like you are. So anything that you can do to help them and help them see your picture by if you have a copy of it, I think that's a great idea.
I second that.
Let's put it into the notes because that would be a third for me. Yeah. Yeah,
Thank you.
I would echo all of that. I mean, I've typically always had someone's resume in front of me, but it doesn't mean that's always guaranteed. And I think being able to like walk me through your experience on your resume or relate back to your cover letter just helps you be stronger and me being able to envision you in the role that I'm hiring for.
I have another comment, but I also like not only bringing your resume, but also I've created like a portfolio of projects that I've done or presentations I've put together and created like a separate binder that like looks very professional. And just you don't have to like go through it in the interview if there's no time, but just sharing that and giving them that whole copy to the hiring manager has helped me a lot and started a conversation and kind of puts you like above and beyond the person who maybe just brought their resume or their cover letter.
Of that. That would put you above and beyond most people. And it also leaves something with us when you leave. So we have something tangible to remember. And especially if it's colorful and easy to read. Like most of us don't want to read 3 to 4 or 5 pages of type 10-point font. And we don't have the time to do that. But to have something that is bright and colorful and has lots of graphics just to kind of shoot out there, that is actually a great idea.
And just to kind of piggyback off of what Ashana just mentioned, from your experiences when you were on the side of interviewing candidates, what are some other things that you have seen that made candidates stand out during the interviews?
The way that they shake hands often and make eye contact. I cannot tell you how often you cannot go back and get that, right? It tells me something immediately about a candidate when I go and I greet them and I shake their hand, and that moment, that presence, if they have a strong handshake, if they're willing to look you in the eye, I think is really important.
Confidence. Somebody that, they might not know it all, but they're confident. And you can tell confident people can be nervous too. So having some nerves and being able to own it and just still be there just shows a lot of ability to get things done even when we aren't certain of it. And so I think that that's really important too.
Yeah, I would agree with both things that have been said. I think that first impression is important, looking somebody in the eye and showing them that you're excited to be there, although the nerves are going crazy. They are. It just solidifies the fact that you have made a choice to be here. You want to work for this place. And so I think that Bruce really stands out. And if you brought me a binder of all your amazing things that you've done, it would certainly be helpful. That would definitely stick out in my mind. I could tell you that much, but it is certainly not expected.
Another thing I like to do is like make jokes. Like I like to just be funny and that kind of lifts the mood. Not like, inappropriate jokes obviously, but.
So I have a couple of questions in the chat. So the first two are kind of connected. So the first one is if the student is wondering what is considered a weakness, and then two, what are some tips for talking about our weaknesses without sabotaging ourselves?
That's a great question.
I am, and maybe my peers here can, I don't know that anymore this day and age, folks are really focused in on weaknesses. I know that a lot of times that you go in somewhere and they're like, well, tell me about a strength and a weakness. I don't ask that question. Nobody on my team asks that question. I Personally, I hate that question. I think it's a ridiculous thing to ask somebody, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? I think anybody could manufacture a response to that. So I think what you should do is just think about how to frame it in the, keeping everything in kind of a positive light. Like we all know we have strengths and weaknesses. Um, I would also yeah, be cautious about working for somebody who's going to ask about the strength and weakness things, right? I just don't. Ugh. I think you're likely not going to run into that as frequently anymore. Ladies, would you agree with that? I don't even know that that's something that folks are still asking. And if they are, I would love to be educated on that right now.
I agree
Oh,
wholeheartedly.
thank
I
God.
think I think it's a thing of the past, especially right now in this market.
Oh, yeah.
It is, you guys are coming into applying for positions at an ideal time for an
Hmm.
applicant. It is definitely an applicant's market right now, candidates market. So my job, and the Tiffany's can agree with me, I hope so, is to make you to want to work for me and work on my team. I want you to see what we have to offer and who we are. And I want to get to know you for who you are, including your weaknesses, because we all have them. And so I don't want to exploit that
Hmm.
on your first interview. I really want to embrace who you are as a person, so you can embrace us as a team. Um, and you really are applying for positions right now when there's a lot more open positions than there are good qualified candidates that want to move.
Hmm.
So
Actually, I just wanted to make a comment. I did get that question just like about a month ago from an employer. They asked me, what are my weaknesses and how have I worked around it, or how have I, you know, made adjustments towards, and what are my
Tamara, how did
strengths?
you answer that?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I think what I said was that I tend to be very reserved. So like I tend to be a very quiet person, so I have to like really pay attention to actually speaking up sometimes. And so I've grown as a person to learn how to speak up when I need to in order to, live in a working environment. So I just have kind of learned that's my weakness and I have to like actually grow and be a person to work around it. So
I think that's a great answer.
thank you.
I think it's perfect.
I actually
Yeah,
have a question too, but I can wait until Tiffany goes.
Tamara, that what you just said is absolutely perfect. If somebody is still asking that question, that's exactly the way that they're thinking you're going to answer it. Is that, hey, I ran across a roadblock, or through my various maybe while I've been studying, these have been some of the things that I've needed to overcome, but this is how I overcame them, or these are the things I'm continuing to do to overcome. Um, I guess what we're saying weakness, which I agree, it is a really old school question,
Oh,
but I
yeah.
think it could still pop up, and we need to be prepared on how to answer it. But that is really what somebody is looking for you to answer, is exactly how you just said it.
Thank you. Can I ask a question too? I actually am filling out an interview or a job application, and one of the questions was like, what is the minimum salary you would like?
Oh, pick me.
So, okay, okay, thank you.
Okay. I was hoping we would broach this topic. This is one of my favorites. So, does everybody know that in the state of Nevada now we have salary transparency laws, which is a really phenomenal thing, particularly for um, women and minorities. It's a really exciting thing. So, if if you are filling out an application and it says, what are your salary expectations? You don't have to list them there. I do recommend that you do because it makes it easier in the filtering process. However, once you have spoken with a recruiter or a hiring manager, what you should be saying is, what's the compensation range? And then by law, that has to be given to you. So make sure that, and you will get that question because we still ask it, right? We're by law, we're still allowed to ask, what are your compensation expectations? Here's the other thing I would tell you about that. It is so common for folks to be frightened to talk about money. And what I would tell you is particularly when you're in a candidate market, I mean, anytime you're in the market period, but particularly right now when you're in a candidate market, the difference between getting what you want right now and not getting what you want is going to be saying what you want. Shoot for the moon. If you miss, you'll end up in the stars. So go big. You guys are like in a really good spot right now. Everybody's going to be in my applicant tracking system right now. Like, I want $11 billion, Tiffany.
I
And
agree.
good, you should. You should be in there doing that.
I agree 100% with everything. And it's important. I think it's just been a month or so that Nevada has gotten those laws for the compensation and transparency. Am I
October,
wrong on that?
October 21.
October 21.
October,
Okay, a
yeah.
little bit longer.
We
Time
were
flies by. I still keep
very
thinking it's
excited.
November. But so a lot of companies haven't caught on to that, or they're not aware of it. They're catching up. But by law, they should be telling you what the compensation is, just as Tiffany said. So that's important for you to know as well.
Yeah.
Would you recommend the same thing for those students that are applying out of state? How do you recommend they approach that? How should they
Yeah.
answer?
Yeah. Should ask them, what is the compensation range? If you are talking to somebody in Nevada, they are required to tell you. So, and just so that everybody understands, and I'm sure certainly my panelists do, but it is to create transparency around compensation and pay so that you don't have those big gaps, right? And so, I say this all the time. I give a salary workshop for the grad college as well, and I say we pay jobs, not people. And you have to remember that. So if you're coming out of a job that paid $50,000 and you're going into a job that's going to require a skill set that demands $70,000, you shouldn't get paid 60 because they're getting a bargain, right? You should get paid what that job pays for what you're going to come in and what you're going to do in your skill set. So I'm telling you guys, go big. Just start asking. It'll be great. I promise you. And if it's not, you email me and I'll help you out.
It's also important to know too that sometimes inexperienced recruiters or HR professionals, it's awkward for them to talk about money too. So ask the question. Sometimes they're not going to just bring it up, but they will answer it if they're asked it, especially if it's asked in a manner where it makes it comfortable. And then another thing too, some people don't advertise salaries because sometimes I'm afraid to advertise a salary in a position because if I say it pays 80 to 85, I don't want to defer the person that might apply for 90. I want to be able to have that conversation with them and say, we're paying 80 to 85. And be able to have that verbal conversation with a candidate to say 90 is not that far off, please apply. And
That's
have that
exactly why I don't do it. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that 100%.
Yeah.
So someone has a follow-up question here in the chat asking, does that apply to a promotion as well?
Yes. Yeah, you should be having those conversations, certainly. If you are an internal applicant, like for a promotion, once you've had that interview, it has to be a full-blown interview. But here's the catch when you are internal, guys, you have to go and ask them to give you the comp range, right? They're not required like we are. Anytime I talk to somebody, I have to turn around and like send them out the comp range or I tell them the comp range verbally, right? But when you are an internal applicant, you have to then say to them when you're done interviewing, hey, would you mind sending me the compensation range? And I'll tell you guys, don't be afraid. So the biggest thing a lot of times that I find is kind of like that nervous thing, right? People don't want to have awkward conversations. Everything we do in life is pain avoidance, right? We don't want to be uncomfortable. So we just like, or we ask it like this, well, I don't want to be like weird if it's too soon for me to ask, but how much, does this pay? Like, come right out. Again, because particularly when we're in a candidate market, you'll thank me for it later. I promise you.
I was just going to make a quick comment. I actually live up here in the Seattle area, and we are also required to talk the salary range here in Washington. So I think that's, big win for all of us. I'm sure that this is starting to catch around to all of the states, but yeah, don't be afraid to ask. We definitely want you to be asking, because we recognize that if it's um, if it's not enough for you, then you might not want to go through that whole applying, right? Because it takes a lot of time. And I think that's just important to know that it's definitely your right to ask, because more and more you need to just understand what that range is. So if you're even in if it's below you, then you need to move on.
Or what if it's way above you, but you don't actually know that? So you're like in your mind, you're thinking like, yeah, I need like 60. And they're like, well, it only pays 110,
Okay.
right?
So, when is it appropriate during the interview to ask about salary and benefits? When should we to approach that topic?
I would tell you that at the conclusion of your first phone call with a recruiter or a hiring manager, that is the appropriate time. You should start immediately. If you ever get to the end of a recruitment process and find out that you are $50,000 apart on the compensation, somebody has failed and it's likely your recruiter.
I agree. I can tell you that I've lost a candidate one time because we were $40,000 off, and it was my mess up. It was 100%. I had to own it and say, she was a last minute ad, and she jumped in on as an applicant the very last minute when we were already at our final stage.
Mhm.
So I didn't have that opportunity to have that conversation with her, and she wanted $40,000 more. And I just, as much as she was worth it, I didn't have the budget for it. Working, it's a state job there. So I definitely had to own it and apologize. I'm still friends with her today, still trying to recruit her. But that's one of the things that we have to own, that that's on us to have that conversation. And sometimes we forget, sometimes we make mistakes. So when you're able to ask that question, it's like, oh yeah, let me let me do that for you. Let's have that conversation. So
Marianne, if it makes you feel any better, I also have learned that the hard way.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's happened to all of us. Like we've all done that.
We're human too.
Yeah.
We're human too. And when you show as an applicant your human side, it really is endearing.
So, since we're already on the topic of salary and benefits, how can we negotiate for more benefits and a higher salary?
I'll start this one off. Yeah.
Okay.
And then fill in. I'll say that I made a mistake many, many years ago. Maybe it's, imposter syndrome popping up for me as a woman, and just not having a lot of confidence in myself, that probably for the first 10 years, maybe 13 years, I just always accepted whatever came. I thought it was, that somebody had my best interest at heart, that they had, fought hard and long for me and had gone to the table to ask for whatever it is that I could get. So I've always just said, great, thank you so much for the offer. I just said, okay, move on. I went through a reorganization where I got laid off, and I learned through that process of how to negotiate. And since then, I've negotiated every single time. And whether or not somebody says no to me, that's something different. But I've negotiated every time. And so the question, I think, is, when do you do it? And my answer to that would be, you have to have the offer in hand. The offer has to be extended to you. And in that moment, you thank them graciously and you say, I need to take a moment, or 24 hours to 48 hours, to think through what it is that you've offered to me. And I will get back to you within that period of time. And then at that moment in time, you take a look at the pros and cons list, right? You look at those benefits, you look at the vacation, the package, the dollar amount, and you compare what the job is into what what the salary range is, and then you come back to the recruiter and you share with them what it is that you would like to see. Maybe that's an extra, $2,000 per year. Maybe that's an extra $10,000 per year. Like the other Tiffany said, go big, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
go for it. And again, you have the offer at hand, so they cannot pull it back at that moment in time. You have to withdraw as a candidate in order for that to no longer be the case. So you have their full attention. So I would say while you have it, take advantage of it. And the worst that could happen is they could say no. They could come back and give you a slightly different offer. So maybe you ask for 10,000 more, and they come back and say, well, we can't meet that 10,000, but we can meet 5,000. So I mean that you're better from where you started.
Think there's a few tools that you can
Mhm.
use as well. One of them is salary.com, and you can go on salary.com for free and put in your zip code, area code, sorry. And then from there, narrow it down and put in your field, and it will give you a generalized market value for that position. And it'll tell you the 50th percentile in your zip code. And you can go from there and at least have that idea to see. Now, it's not 100% the best, most accurate information. It is free information, but I think it does at least give you a starting point. And then, ask your professors, ask your mentors, what do they see being paid in the area in that realm? So you have that as your starting point, so you're not going in there blindly as well.
I'm going to piggyback off of and summarize what both of you ladies very eloquently articulated. You're both, I agree completely, you're both right. I think the biggest mistake people make in the negotiation process is that they don't have the conversation up front, like we were just talking about. When you have that conversation up front, you don't get to a point where you're going to be involved in some big back and forth car negotiation. Have the conversation up front, because if you say to them, hey, what does this range pay? And they're like, well, what are your compensation expectations? And the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have a realistic expectation, which is what Marianne's talking about when she's saying go and at least look. It might not be perfect, but you need to be realistic about what your skill set, right, demands in the market, and B, understanding like, kind of where you're going to situate, because they could give you a range of like, okay, it's 50 to 100,000, but their target might be 65, and they're not necessarily going to go over that because maybe there's 5 similarly situated employees who they can't pay you more than. So, just kind of understanding that, I think, is really important. But the benefit of having the conversation and setting those expectations up with your interviewer, your hiring managers up front, is that by the time you get to the offer stage, it's likely that you're not going to need to negotiate because you're going to get exactly what you're asking for. And that's one of the reasons I think it is so important. And Tiffany, I have to commend you. God bless you for sharing that story, because I cannot tell you how many times I hear a story like that. And I want to share just very quickly with you guys an anecdote that came from one of the salary workshops that we did here at UNLV. And I was talking to a young lady, and she said, I'm a new mom. I'm just getting my graduate degree, and I'm doing all these things. And I don't know. I don't really like to haggle. I don't really like to do all those things. And basically what she was telling me in the entire class at large was that she was very uncomfortable, right? She just didn't want to do this. And I looked at her and I said, how old's your baby? And she said, he's like, I can't remember. He's like 2 or 3 months old. And I said, what's your baby's name? And she said, Luke. And I said, so how about this? You're not negotiating for yourself anymore. You're now negotiating for Luke. And it was one of the most powerful professional moments I'd ever had in my life. She broke down and cried. And it was really wonderful because that made sense to her. So I'd like to embark that piece of advice on all of you. If you can't do it for yourself, think about who that person in your life is, right? Who's that person that you're gunning for? Don't negotiate for you, negotiate for them. Because my daughter's expensive. She's broke and 9 and needs a lot of stuff.
Great advice. Mine's 15, and they just get more and more expensive.
About to get a driver's license, going to need a
Yeah.
car.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I need better coping mechanisms that are more expensive. Spa days.
That's right. Wine, inflation's making it go up. Yeah.
Wine.
But it's true. Think about who you're negotiating for. Maybe it's not for you actually.
Thank you all so much. So in the case where we might receive multiple offers, what are some factors we should consider before deciding?
Actually, I think that where you feel at home, where you are most comfortable is really important. These are the people and the team that you're going to spend a lot of time with, um, and where you're going to feel valued. So that's the warm fuzzy portion, besides who's going to pay you the best and who has the best medical benefits and things like that, which are all really important. But at the end of the day, you want to go home and relax and say, I spent the day with people that have the same values as I do, and I feel good about myself. And I feel supported, and I feel like I supported my coworkers too. So for me, it's that feeling that's important too.
Pick your boss. If you have multiple offers, pick your boss. That's going to have the biggest
100%.
influence. Yeah.
Mhm. Most people leave, sorry, my dog's barking. Most people leave jobs because of their relationship with their boss, or they don't feel respected by their boss, or they don't
That's
feel
right.
valued, or they're not learning. So really yeah.
What I tell other people is like you're also interviewing them during that time. So like those questions that you ask at the very end, I like to ask like one or two questions that will help me learn like, oh, how do you feel about mentorship? Or, things like that that will teach me like what kind of leader they're going to be for me.
That's exactly it, actually. I think that to me, the thing that has always been really important is I like to have a feeling that I know that I can continue to grow. And if I think that the person that is interviewing me, and I think back, and congratulations on multiple offers, because that would mean that you've got your pick of the litter, which is amazing. But I think who of all of those people stuck out to you as having your best interest at heart? Because those are the people who are going to continue to help you grow in your wherever it is that you've chosen. Because if you're just starting out in this particular company, maybe it is your dream job, and maybe you at this moment in time you think that you're going to be there for a really long time. But I'll tell you from my own experience is what I thought was my dream job. After a couple of years in that role, I was starting to see what people were doing around me, and I started thinking about how I could continue to grow. And I think just as people, we want to continue to grow, we want to continue to learn, and we want to continue to do that for others around us. So I think, to what has been said, pick your boss and pick a place where you feel like they have you as um, your best interest at heart and what you're trying to do and accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Shauna, you nailed it on the head. What I talk to my team about, because I work my butt off trying to get candidates to apply for positions. I have really difficult positions to fill. And I work really hard for those candidates. So when I get them on campus or I get in front of them, I want the red carpet rolled out for them. I want them to feel special. I want them to see who we are as a team. So they want to work for us too. So if you're interviewing for, you can sense that and you can feel that as a candidate. And if that's what you see, and you see a boss that's going to support you and that you get along with, and you know that you just feel that right away. And so I think that that's important to look for. So.
Thank you all. So switching a little bit to a different topic, how long should we wait before we contact the interviewer if we don't hear anything back?
I get this question all the time. Um, After the interview, I think a week is appropriate, right? Like you can follow up in a week, and then give it another week, because I think one of the things that people take for granted is, and I say this all the time, you have no idea like what's going on in at that person's desk. I mean, you guys, we're sitting here, right, interacting, and this is fantastic, but you guys see all the chaos going on around me, right? So what that means is I might have 10 people I need to get back to right now, but as soon as I hang up this phone, I'm gonna have a line of 15 people here waiting to tell me stuff. So people take for granted that like they're not ignoring you. Your recruiter's not ignoring you. The hiring manager's not ignoring you. They don't hate you. They're not blowing you off. They get incredibly inundated. And you want to follow up at a reasonable pace, but don't be a stalker. I don't, I'm never more impressed with somebody because they are following up with me habitually. So 1 week, if you don't get anything, or typically somebody will respond to you and say, hey, we're in the interview process with other candidates. We're kind of still moving along. But on that note too, one of the good things to do is when you're talking to your recruiter or when you're talking to the interviewer, whoever it is that you're meeting with, ask them what are the expectations. Say, hey, what are the next steps in this process if I'm being considered, so that you have an idea about what this is really going to look like. And they'll tell you, oh, we don't anticipate making a decision for about a month, or however that is, so that you can set reasonable expectations.
Agree. Another way to reframe that maybe is to follow up with a thank you note. And it's not my experience, I've only been at UNLV for 3.5 years. I was in the private sector before. And in the private sector, I didn't see that happen very often. But at UNLV, it really is, in higher education and education positions, it really is like, oh, that person didn't send a thank you note. So it's a difference there. But I can see that really being something to set candidates aside. Even if it's an email, dear recruiter and hiring team, thank you so much for taking that hour to chat with me. It was really great to know you. I'm looking forward to hearing from you soon. So instead of the following up and asking, what am I going to hear from you? Have you made your decision? Follow up with a thank you note and see how that works.
That's great advice.
I would agree with everything that's been said so far. I've always appreciated the thank you notes. I do think something that Tiffany said really stood out to me, and that is really understanding what that timeline is, because you could be the very first person that they interviewed, and then that interviewer might be going on vacation for a week and a half, and then they're not going to do any more interviews for 2 more weeks. So I think just having a good idea of what that timeline looks like can help put you at ease, as you know what to expect and what the process is supposed to be. So yeah, I would definitely agree with all of those things. And um, I have had somebody habitually email me every day. And um, I think that stands out in a different way. That maybe you don't want your name to be that person. Although very persistent, I think there is like a good balance that needs to take place. So I mean, I've been on the other side waiting for that phone call, waiting for that response, and I always put it in my head of like I was going to reach out once a week, checking in on how things are going, because a week can be a long time in the world of recruiting. And I've seen some positions I've been hired within 3 days. I've seen other positions I've been hired for and it's taken 6 weeks for. So everything is a pretty different, and timelines can be different. So I would just keep that in mind, and as you're thinking.
And I would add this too, particularly in this market, uh, collect and select. Be interviewing at a lot of different places so that you're not so laser focused on this one role that when you go into that interview, you say, or when you're meeting with the recruiter, you say, hey, by the way, just so you know, I just want to be transparent up front. I'm also interviewing at other places or with other people. I will tell you guys, there is nothing that sets me on fire faster than that. I'm like, oh, you are? I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. And then I will tell you what I'm doing. I am lighting fires on my hiring managers. I'm like, you know what's going to happen, right? Time kills all deals. Like, what are you guys going to do? You're going to make a decision? Like, what are we doing? That is the one thing that will make me like, ooh, I don't want to lose them. So be busy, collect and select.
I like that, collect and select. That's great. And I can't agree more. If somebody's telling me, you know, I just accepted another position. I have 3 days, or I just got another offer. I have 3 days to figure it out. I'm like, give me those 3 days. Like,
I know.
don't
The
don't
panic in
go
my
anywhere. And
heart.
I'm going to call you as much as I can. So, but you also want to make sure that that's accurate information and you're not just saying that.
I don't even care if it's accurate. I will start
Yeah.
sprinting upstairs. Like this. It's like daggers in my heart. I have another offer.
That's great. Thank you. So, since we are all out of time for today, I just want to open it up to our panelists just for any last comments or tips or tools they want to give to our audience before we go ahead and wrap it up for the day.
I would just close by saying, please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have additional questions, I love to connect at heart. Email me, ask me questions. If I can do anything to help any of you, please reach out. Please let me know.
I would close with the same. I'm right there on campus. I'm here to support the students of UNLV. So if there's anything that you need in the future, please send me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to have coffee and help you with this process. It's nice interacting with everybody.
Yes, I'll end with, I just wish you all good luck. I know this process can be a lot, and as all of you are, going through school and looking at graduation, you know, just keep moving forward and reach out to your network. I think that's just such a fantastic advice that both my fellow panelists have given, because networking can win you a lot of things, and knowing when and who to ask for great advice will only help you as you move forward in your career. And best of luck. I'd love to connect on LinkedIn as well, but thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all so much for sharing your time with us, this expertise and really great experience that you've given to our panel participants. And then thank you to our participants for joining us, for asking engaging questions. We really appreciate you being here. I'm just going to drop a survey in the chat if you don't mind just filling that out for us. It helps us as we continue to provide you all with workshops. But other than that, I hope everyone has a really great rest of your evening. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.